The Imperial flagship hung in the sky above Earth like a second moon. It was so massive that people on the ground could see it clearly during the day, a dark shape that blocked out the sun. Inside the ship, Empress Valthara walked through the corridors with heavy steps that made the metal floors shake. She was 12 feet tall, covered in dark red scales that shimmered under the lights. Her eyes glowed like molten gold, and when she breathed, small wisps of smoke came from her nostrils. Valthara was the Dragon Empress of the 7th Quadrant. She ruled over 200 different species across dozens of star systems. Her people, the Drakari, were born warriors and conquerors. They could breathe fire hot enough to melt steel, and their scales could deflect most weapons. For 3,000 years, the Drakari had been the most feared species in known space. 3 years ago, humans had joined the Galactic Empire. They had no choice, really. When the Empire found Earth, humanity was given a simple option: join peacefully or be conquered. The humans were smart enough to choose peace. Now they lived in designated districts on various Imperial worlds, working as laborers, technicians, and servants. Most species in the Empire looked down on humans. They were weak, fragile creatures with no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. They died easily and lived such short lives. Valthara was inspecting the human colony district on her flagship. It was something she did once every few months, making sure the humans had adequate food, shelter, and medical care. The Empire might see them as lesser beings, but Valthara believed in treating all subjects fairly. A good ruler takes care of all their people, even the weak ones. The human district was crowded and noisy. Families lived in small quarters, and children ran through the narrow streets playing games. The adults stopped and bowed deeply when they saw the Empress approaching. Fear was clear on their faces. Valthara was used to this reaction. Most beings feared the Drakari, and she had learned long ago not to take it personally. She walked past the residential area and came to the relief center. This was where humans who had no family or were too sick to work stayed. The building was clean but sad-looking. Valthara entered, and the human workers inside immediately dropped to their knees. "Rise," Valthara said. Her voice was deep and rumbled like distant thunder. "I am here to inspect the facilities." The director of the center, a nervous human woman named Lisa, quickly stood up. She was shaking as she led the Empress through the building. They walked past rooms where elderly humans rested, past a medical bay where the sick received treatment, and finally to the children's area. "We have 12 orphans currently," Lisa explained, her voice trembling. "Most lost their parents in work accidents. We care for them until they are old enough to enter the workforce." Valthara looked at the children. They were so small, so fragile. Human children seemed even more delicate than the adults. Some were playing with simple toys, others were eating a meal, and a few were sleeping. Then Valthara saw him. A small boy sat alone in the corner. He looked about 3 years old with light brown hair and big brown eyes. While the other children made noise, laughing and talking, this boy was completely silent. He just sat there, watching everything with an intense focus that seemed unusual for such a young child. "That one," Valthara pointed with a clawed finger. "What is his story?" Lisa looked where the Empress was pointing, and her face became sad. "That is Danny. His parents died 6 months ago in a mining collapse. He was only 2.5 years old when they brought him here." "Why does he not play with the others?" Lisa hesitated, then answered quietly. "Danny cannot speak, Your Majesty. He has never made a sound, not a word, not a cry, not even a laugh. Our doctors examined him. They believe he was born with damaged vocal cords. He will never be able to talk." Something stirred inside Valthara's chest. It was a feeling she had not experienced in many years, not since she lost her own hatchling in a war decades ago. Among the Drakari, being unable to roar or breathe fire was considered the worst fate possible. It meant you could never call for your family, never warn others of danger, never participate in the sacred fire songs. Such hatchlings rarely survived. Most were abandoned or died from being unable to cry for help, but humans were different. They could not breathe fire to begin with, so that was not the tragedy. For them, the tragedy was the silence itself, not being able to speak, to communicate, to be heard. Valthara walked closer to Danny. The boy looked up at her with those big brown eyes. Most human children cried or ran away when they saw a Drakari up close. But Danny just watched her calmly, studying her face with that same intense focus. The Empress knelt down, bringing her huge reptilian head closer to the small human child. Danny reached out one tiny hand and touched her scaled snout. His fingers were so small they barely covered one of her scales. Valthara felt her 2 hearts beat faster. This child showed no fear. He was curious, brave even. How is he treated here? Valthara asked, her eyes still on Danny. We care for him as best we can, Lisa said quickly.
He eats well, he is healthy.
But the other children do not include him in their games. They find his silence strange, and he will be difficult to place in work assignments when he is older. Communication is important in most jobs. Valthara stood up to her full height. She made a decision that surprised even herself. I am taking this child. Lisa's mouth fell open. Your Majesty? You heard me. I am adopting him. He will live in my private quarters from this day forward. But Your Majesty, he is human. He is damaged. He cannot even speak. Surely there are better. Do you question my decision? Valthara's voice became dangerous and smoke poured from her nostrils. Lisa immediately dropped to her knees again. No, Your Majesty. Of course not. I will prepare his things immediately. Word spread quickly through the flagship. The Dragon Empress had adopted a human child. A defective human child who could not speak. Her advisors were horrified. Commander Vex, her chief military officer, requested an emergency meeting. This is madness, Your Majesty, Vex said bluntly. He was also Drakari, though not as large as Valthara. The court will see this as weakness. You are the Dragon Empress. You should not concern yourself with broken human children. Valthara held Danny in one arm. The boy seemed comfortable there, looking around at the Grand Council chamber with wide eyes. The boy is not broken. He is silent. There is a difference. He cannot roar. He cannot breathe fire. Among our people, such a hatchling would not survive. He is not Drakari. He is human. And now he is under my protection. Anyone who harms him or insults him will answer to me personally. Make sure everyone understands this. Vex bowed, though his disapproval was clear. As you command, Your Majesty. That night, Valthara set up a small bed in her personal chambers for Danny. The boy explored the room with careful steps, touching the strange furniture, looking at the windows that showed the stars outside. Valthara watched him and wondered what she had gotten herself into. In her long life, she had commanded armies, destroyed rebellions, and negotiated treaties with 100 different species. But she had never raised a child, not even a Drakari hatchling. And this was a human child who could not even tell her what he needed. Danny climbed into the bed she had prepared. He looked so small in it, so vulnerable. Valthara lay down on her own resting platform nearby. She left the lights on low so the boy would not be scared in the unfamiliar place. As she was about to close her eyes, she saw Danny looking at her. He gave her a small smile, the first she had seen from him. Then he closed his eyes and went to sleep. Valthara felt that strange warmth in her chest again. Perhaps this was not madness after all. Perhaps this silent human child was exactly what she needed, and perhaps she was exactly what he needed too. 2 weeks passed with Danny living in the Empress's quarters. Valthara quickly learned that raising a human child was nothing like raising a Drakari hatchling. Drakari young were mostly independent from birth. They could hunt small prey within days and only needed their parents for protection and teaching fire breathing. Human children were completely helpless. They needed constant care, specific foods, regular sleep, and something Valthara found very puzzling. They needed play. Danny was a quiet presence in her life. He followed her around the chambers, watched her work on her data tablets, and sat beside her during meals. But he never smiled much. He never laughed. He just observed everything with those serious brown eyes. Valthara knew something was wrong, but she did not know how to fix it. She called for Dr. Helen Price, the chief medical officer for the human district. Helen was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She came to the imperial quarters nervously, clearly uncomfortable being in the presence of the Dragon Empress. How can I serve you, Your Majesty? Helen asked with a bow. The boy, Valthara said, gesturing to Danny, who sat on the floor arranging some data cubes into patterns. He does not seem happy. Is he sick? Helen watched Danny for a moment, then shook her head. No, Your Majesty. He is physically healthy, but human children need more than food and shelter. They need social interaction. They need to play with other children, to run and climb and explore. They need stimulation and fun. Fun. Valthara repeated the word slowly. It was not a concept that mattered much to Drakari. Where do human children go for this fun? We have a playground in the human district. It is a place where children can play safely. There are structures for climbing, swings, slides, and open space to run. Parents bring their children there every day. Valthera thought about this. The idea of taking the Empress of the 7th Quadrant to a children's playground was ridiculous. Her advisors would have collective heart failures. But when she looked at Danny sitting quietly and alone, she made her decision. Tomorrow, she announced, I will take the boy to this playground. Helen's eyes went wide. Your Majesty, are you certain? The humans there will be terrified. Your presence might, I do not care. The boy needs this, so we will go. The next afternoon, Valthera walked through the human district carrying Danny in her arms. People scattered in front of her, pressing themselves against walls and into doorways. Whispers followed her everywhere. Children pointed and their parents pulled them away quickly. Guards followed at a distance, both Drakari and human security personnel, unsure what to make of this situation. The playground was a simple area with metal structures painted in bright colors. There were swings hanging from chains, a slide, some climbing bars, and a sandbox. About 20 human children were playing there when Valthera arrived. The moment they saw her, everything stopped. Children froze in mid-run. Parents grabbed their kids protectively. Valthera set Danny down on the ground near the sandbox. The boy looked at the other children with interest, but he did not move toward them. He just stood there, holding on to one of Valthera's clawed fingers. A heavy silence filled the playground. No one knew what to do. The Dragon Empress had never come to a place like this before. Was this an inspection? Was someone in trouble? Parents pulled their children back further, creating a wide, empty space around Valthera and Danny. The Empress felt frustration building inside her. This was not working. The other children were too afraid to play, and Danny remained isolated. She was about to leave when a man walked toward them. He was in his early 30s, wearing work clothes covered in grease and dirt. His brown hair was messy, and he had oil stains on his hands. He walked with a casual confidence that bordered on disrespect. Most beings would never approach a Drakari so casually, let alone the Empress herself. Hey there, the man said, kneeling down near Danny. He did not bow to Valthera. He did not show fear. He just focused on the boy. You look like you want to see something cool. Valthera's protective instincts flared immediately. Smoke began rising from her nostrils. Human, you will show proper respect or... Yeah, I know. Big scary dragon empress, the man said, still not looking at her. He was making hand gestures to Danny. Simple signs that humans used. But your kid looks bored and I can fix that. Unless you want to keep standing here while everyone's too scared to breathe? Several parents gasped at his rudeness, but Valthera found herself more curious than angry. This human was either very brave or very stupid. Danny was watching the man with clear interest, more engaged than Valthera had seen him in weeks. What is your name, human? Valthera asked. Jake Morrison. I fix the atmospheric processors around here, and this is my daughter Katie. He pointed to a young girl with red hair who was peeking out from behind a slide. Katie, come here. It's okay. Katie ran over and stood beside her father. She looked at Danny and smiled. Hi, I'm 6 years old. How old are you? She paused, then looked at her father. Dad, why isn't he talking? Because he can't, sweetheart. But that's okay. He can still be your friend. Jake pulled something from his tool belt. It was a small welding torch, the kind mechanics use for quick repairs. What are you doing with that? Valthera asked, her voice sharp. Relax, I'm not going to hurt anyone. Just watch. Jake adjusted some settings on the torch. He held it up and activated it, creating a small controlled flame in his palm. The flame danced and changed colors, going from orange to blue to green. Cool, right? Danny's entire face changed. His eyes went wide and bright. He stepped forward, reaching toward the flame with both hands. Valthera almost pulled him back, but she stopped herself. The boy was showing more emotion than she had ever seen from him. Jake made the flame dance in patterns, creating little spirals and bursts. Danny was completely focused, his mouth slightly open in wonder. Katie giggled and clapped her hands. Do the sparkly one, Dad. Jake adjusted the torch again, and the flame became filled with tiny sparks that shot out like miniature fireworks. Danny made a small sound, something between a gasp and a laugh, though no actual noise came out. But his whole body expressed joy. Humans and fire, Jake said, looking up at Valthera for the first time. We've had a relationship with it for thousands of years. Every human kid loves fire. It's in our DNA or something. But you cannot breathe fire, Valthera said. You must create it with tools. True. We're not born with it like you guys. But maybe that makes it more special for us. We had to learn to make it, control it, use it. Fire made us who we are. It cooked our food, kept us warm, lit up the darkness. We built our entire civilization on it. Valthera had never thought about it that way. The Drakari were born with fire. It was just a natural part of them, like having claws or scales. But humans had to capture fire, study it, master it. They had no natural flame, so they created their own. Can he hold it? Jake asked, gesturing to Danny. It will burn him. Not if I modify the settings. Jake worked with the torch for a moment, then created a flame that barely gave off any heat. He guided Danny's small hand close to it. The flame flickered near the boy's fingers, warm but not burning. Danny's face was pure amazement. Other children started moving closer, their curiosity overcoming their fear. Katie took Danny's other hand. Come play with me. We can build a castle in the sand, okay? Danny looked up at Valthera as if asking permission. The Empress nodded slowly. Go, play! Katie pulled Danny toward the sandbox. Within minutes, other children joined them. They did not seem to care that Danny could not talk. They just included him in their games, showing him how to fill buckets with sand and stack them to make towers. Jake stood up and faced Valthera properly for the first time. He still did not bow, but he nodded respectfully. You know, taking in that kid, it's a good thing you did. Most people would have just left him in the center. He reminded me of someone I lost, Valthera admitted. She was not sure why she was telling this human her personal business. My own hatchling died in a war. She was unable to breathe fire properly. It made her weak in battle. I'm sorry, Jake said simply. But Danny's not weak. He just can't talk. There's a difference. He's smart. You can see it in his eyes. He notices everything. You are very bold to speak to me this way, Jake Morrison. Most beings would not dare, Jake shrugged. I fix machines for a living. You get used to dealing with problems directly. No point dancing around things. Besides, you brought a kid to a playground. Can't be that scary if you're doing stuff like that. A sound that might have been a laugh rumbled in Valthera's chest. This human was refreshing in his honesty. She watched Danny playing with the other children, saw him smile as Katie helped him build a sand tower, saw him interact and be included for the first time. You understand children well, Valthera observed. I understand what they need, fun friends and someone who believes in them. Jake looked at Danny thoughtfully. That kid's special. I can tell. He's going to surprise everyone someday. Valthera did not know how right those words would prove to be. The playground visit changed everything. Danny seemed more alive after that day. He smiled more often. And though he still could not make sounds, his silent laughter was clear in the way his small shoulders shook and his eyes crinkled. Valthera found herself taking him back to the playground 3 times a week. Each time, Katie would run to greet them, and Jake would be there, usually on his break from work. What started as playground meetings became something more. Jake began visiting the Imperial flagship regularly. Officially, he was there to perform maintenance on various systems. The atmospheric processors, the water filtration units, the power couplings, all of these needed regular attention. And Jake was one of the best mechanics in the human district, but everyone knew the real reason he came. He was there to teach Danny. Jake would arrive with his toolbox and sit with Danny in a corner of Valthera's chambers. He would pull out simple tools and show the boy how they worked. Screwdrivers, wrenches, pliers, wire cutters. Danny watched everything with intense focus, his small hands reaching out to touch and explore. But it was fire that truly fascinated the boy. Jake brought safe demonstrations of combustion, a small candle flame, a camping lighter, controlled chemical reactions that produced colored smoke and sparks. Each new display captured Danny's complete attention. The boy would sit perfectly still watching the flames dance, his eyes reflecting the light. Why does he love it so much? Valthera asked one day, watching Danny stare at a simple birthday candle Jake had lit. Jake smiled. I told you, it's in our blood. But for Danny, I think it's more than that. Fire makes sound when it burns. It crackles and roars. For a kid who can't make noise himself, maybe watching fire is like having a voice. Valthera had never considered that. Fire was the voice Danny could not have. It spoke for him, in its own way. Over the following weeks, Jake became more ambitious with his projects. He built a small device about the size of a human hand, with buttons and switches on it. When activated, it produced flames of different colors: red, blue, green, orange, purple. Each button created a different effect. I call it a flame painter, Jake explained, handing it carefully to Danny. See these buttons? Press this one for red. This one for blue. You can make patterns. Danny's fingers pressed the buttons experimentally. A jet of red flame shot out, then blue, then a combination of both. The boy's face lit up with excitement.
He began pressing different combinations, creating patterns and sequences.
Within an hour, he had figured out how to make the flames pulse in rhythm, how to alternate colors, how to create spirals and bursts. He's a natural, Jake said with pride. Look at that coordination. Most kids his age can't do that kind of fine motor control. Valthera watched in amazement as Danny created increasingly complex patterns. The boy could not speak, but he was communicating something through the flames. They were like his words, his expressions, his art. Jake built more devices over the next month. Each one was more sophisticated than the last. He created a wrist-mounted unit that let Danny point his hand and create directed flame bursts. He made a chest piece that produced expanding rings of fire in all directions. He built footpads that left trails of flame where Danny walked. Every device was carefully safety tested, designed to be harmless even if something went wrong. Where did you learn to build these things? Valthera asked, watching Jake install a new upgrade to the flame painter. I'm a mechanic. I fix things, I modify things, I build things. Been doing it since I was a kid. My dad taught me. Jake tightened a bolt and tested the connection. Besides, Danny inspires me. When you see a kid that's excited about something, you want to give him more of it. Katie visited often too. She had declared herself Danny's best friend, and nothing would change that. She taught him games that did not require talking. Tag, hide and seek, building with blocks. She was endlessly patient, never frustrated by his silence. She had even learned some basic sign language and was teaching it to Danny. One afternoon, Katie, Danny, and several other human children were playing in a designated area of the ship while their parents worked. Valthera watched from a distance, still not quite understanding children's games, but finding them entertaining. The children were pretending to be explorers on an alien planet. Katie was the captain, naturally. Danny was her chief engineer. The other kids played various crew members. They were investigating a pretend crashed ship, looking for survivors. Danny used his flame painter to cut through doors and weld repairs. The other children made explosion sounds and alarm noises. Danny could not make sounds, but he did not need to. His flame pattern said everything, Your Majesty, a voice said behind her. Commander Vex approached, his scaled face set in disapproval. We need to discuss the human mechanic. Jake Morrison? What about him? He has become too familiar with you and the boy. He does not show proper respect. He walks through this ship like he owns it. The other humans are starting to follow his example, becoming less deferential. Valthera kept watching the children play. And this bothers you, why? It sets a bad precedent. Humans are subjects of the Empire. They should remember their place. Their place, Valthera repeated slowly. She turned to face Vex directly. Tell me, Commander. What is their place? Vex seemed confused by the question. They are workers, technicians. They serve the Empire. And that is all they can be? All they will ever be? They are weak, Your Majesty. They have no natural weapons, no defenses. They die easily. They are the most fragile species in the Empire. Valthera looked back at Danny, who was creating an elaborate flame pattern to signal a rescue ship in the children's game. Perhaps. But they have something else. Something we Drakari are born with, but they must create. They do not accept limitations. They see a problem and they build a solution. Look at that boy. He cannot speak. So a human built him a way to create fire. They gave him something we would never have thought to give. It is artificial, not real fire breathing. And our fire is what? We have organs that produce chemicals, biological tools built into our bodies. How is that different from Danny's devices? Both are tools. His are just external instead of internal. Vex had no answer for that. Valthera dismissed him with a wave. She was beginning to understand something important about humans. They were not weak. They were persistent. They were creative. They refused to accept what nature gave them and constantly pushed for more. Jake arrived that evening with something new. It was larger than his previous devices. A complex rig with multiple components. He set it on a workbench and began explaining it to Valthera while Danny watched closely. This is the big one, Jake said. I've been working on it for 3 weeks. It's a full body system. When Danny wears it, he can create fire from his hands, his feet, and even his mouth. It's all controlled by breath sensors and finger movements. Completely safe, I've tested it 100 times. His mouth? Valthera leaned closer. You mean he could breathe fire? Sort of. Not real fire breathing, but it would look like it. The sensors detect when he exhales strongly, and they trigger the flame nozzle mounted near his mouth. From a distance, you couldn't tell the difference. Valthara felt her 2 hearts beat faster. A human child breathing fire like a Drakari. It should have seemed wrong, but instead it felt right. Danny deserved to have fire. He loved it, understood it, commanded it with more artistry than most young Drakari. They fitted Danny with the device. It took some adjustments to make it comfortable for his small frame. Jake showed him how to control each component. Hand movements for direction, foot pressure for intensity, and strong breaths for the mouth nozzle. Danny practiced for an hour, learning the system. At first, his movements were clumsy and the flames were uneven. But children learn fast, and Danny was particularly determined. Soon he was moving smoothly, creating coordinated patterns from multiple sources at once. He could breathe out and send flame from his mouth while his hands created spirals and his feet left burning trails. Valthara watched in wonder. The boy moved through the chamber like a dancer, fire flowing from him in patterns that were beautiful and complex. He was not just using fire. He was performing with it, creating art. "Jake Morrison," Valthara said formally, "you have given my son a great gift." It was the first time she had called Danny her son out loud. Jake smiled. "He earned it. That kid works harder than anyone I've ever seen. No complaints, no giving up. He just keeps trying until he gets it right." Katie arrived with her father later that week and saw Danny in his new flame system. She clapped and cheered as he showed her what he could do. "You look like a superhero," she said. "Can you teach me? I want to make fire too." Danny immediately began showing her how the hand controls worked. Katie tried to copy his movements, laughing when she got it wrong. The 2 children played together, creating patterns and competing to see who could make the most interesting designs. Watching them, Valthara realized something. Human children did not care about species differences. They did not care that Danny was being raised by an alien Empress. They did not care that he could not speak. They just saw a friend who shared their interests and wanted to play. Perhaps that was the real strength of humanity. They did not see barriers the way other species did. They saw possibilities. Everything changed when Ambassador Krauth arrived on the Imperial flagship. He was Vraxian, a species known for their warrior culture and their belief that strength was the only virtue that mattered. The Vraxians looked like massive insects, with 4 arms covered in sharp blades and armor-like shells that could deflect energy weapons. They stood 8 feet tall and considered themselves the second most powerful species in the Empire. Right after the Drakari Krauth had requested an audience with Empress Valthara to discuss trade agreements. But everyone knew his real purpose. He wanted to challenge her authority and test her for weakness. The Vraxians had been looking for any excuse to increase their own power in the Empire, and rumors about Valthara adopting a defective human child had reached their home world. The audience took place in the Grand Hall, with dozens of officials from various species in attendance. Valthara sat on her throne, Danny standing beside her wearing his flame system. The boy had insisted on coming, and Valthara had allowed it. She wanted the Empire to see that she was not ashamed of her adopted son. Krauth entered with his usual arrogance, his blade-covered arms folded across his shell. He bowed the minimum required by protocol, a barely respectful nod. "Empress Valthara," Krauth began, his voice harsh and grating. "I come with concerns from the Vraxian Council. We have heard disturbing rumors about your adoption." "Disturbing?" Valthara's voice remained calm, but smoke began rising from her nostrils. "Choose your next words carefully, Ambassador. You have taken a human child as your own. A defective one, no less, one that cannot even speak. This shows weakness, Empress. It makes other species question your judgment." Whispers spread through the hall. Several officials looked uncomfortable. Valthara's own advisors shifted nervously. This was a direct insult, something that could not be ignored. "My personal decisions are not your concern," Valthara said coldly. "They are when they affect the Empire's image. The Drakari are warriors, conquerors. You are supposed to represent strength. Instead, you play caretaker to a broken human child." Danny looked up at Valthara. The boy could not speak, but his eyes showed worry. He could sense the tension in the room. Valthara put a protective hand on his shoulder. "You will not speak of him that way again," Valthara warned. Krauth saw his opening. "Then let us test whether he is worthy of the Empress's protection. Among your people, Young ones must complete the fire trial before being recognized as true Drakari. They must breathe their first flame before the court. Valthara felt her blood run cold. She knew where this was going. I challenge the boy, Krauth announced loudly, making sure everyone heard. Let him complete the fire trial. Let him breathe true flame before this assembly. If he succeeds, I will admit I was wrong. If he fails, you must admit that taking him was a mistake and return him to the human district. The hall exploded with conversation. This was a serious challenge, one that followed ancient Drakari tradition. Commander Vex stepped forward. Your Majesty, you cannot accept this. The boy cannot breathe fire. He is human. Exactly, Krauth said with satisfaction. He cannot complete the trial because he is not worthy. The Empress should admit her error. Valthara wanted to refuse. She wanted to throw Krauth off her ship and ban him from Imperial space. But she knew the law. Once a challenge was issued in open court regarding Drakari tradition, it had to be answered. To refuse would make her look weak, would give her enemies ammunition to use against her. Other species would see it as the Empress being too soft, too emotional. When? Valthara asked through gritted teeth. 3 days from now. That should give the child time to prepare. Krauth's tone made it clear he thought no preparation would be enough. After the assembly ended, Valthara carried Danny back to her quarters. The boy looked scared, though he tried to hide it. He had never seen the Empress this angry before. Smoke poured constantly from her nostrils and her scales darkened, which happened when Drakari were extremely upset. Jake arrived within an hour. Word had spread through the human district instantly. He took one look at Valthara's face and knew something terrible had happened. Tell me, Jake said simply. Valthara explained the challenge. Jake listened, his expression growing darker. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Can you refuse? He finally asked. No. Imperial law is clear. I must answer the challenge or lose face. So Danny has 3 days to learn to breathe fire. Real fire, not just the devices. It is impossible. He is human. He has no flame organs, no chemical production, no biological capacity for fire. I will have to return him to the human district and admit I was wrong to adopt him. Jake stood up and began pacing. No, there has to be a way. There's always a way. He ran his hands through his hair, thinking hard. What if we could give him the biological capacity? Not naturally, but artificially. What do you mean? A device. Something internal. Something that would let him actually breathe fire, not just shoot flames from an external tool. If it's inside him, part of him, then it's real fire breathing. Valthara felt a spark of hope, but also fear. That would require surgery. On a 3-year-old child. It is dangerous. Everything is dangerous right now. If we do nothing, you lose him anyway. At least this way he has a chance. Jake left immediately, heading back to the human district. He gathered the best engineers, doctors, and scientists the humans had. They worked through the night in his workshop, designing and testing. Valthara received updates every few hours. The device was possible. It could be done. But it would require delicate surgery in Danny's throat area. Dr. Helen Price came to see Valthara the next morning. She looked exhausted but determined. We have a working prototype. It's a bio-integrated respiratory device. We can implant it in Danny's throat. It will have small chambers that hold compressed gases, harmless ones that only become combustible when mixed. When Danny exhales strongly, the device releases the gases and triggers a small spark. The result is real fire coming from his breath. What are the risks? Valthara asked. Helen hesitated. It's surgery on a very young child in a sensitive area. There could be complications. Infection, rejection, breathing difficulties. The device itself is safe, we've tested it extensively, but any surgery carries risk, especially one this complex. How much risk? Honestly, I would estimate a 90% success rate. But that means 10% chance of serious problems. Valthara looked at Danny. The boy was playing with Katie in the corner, both of them building a structure with blocks. He looked so small, so vulnerable. How could she put him through surgery? How could she risk his life to satisfy political challenges? But if she did not, she would lose him anyway. He would go back to the relief center, to a life of isolation and being seen as defective. He would never smile the way he smiled now. He would never create fire art or play with friends. He would be alone. Jake returned that afternoon with the actual device, a tiny piece of technology no bigger than a human thumb. This is it. We've tested it on artificial throats, on animal subjects, on every possible simulation. It works, it's safe. But you need to make the decision, Your Majesty. Nobody can make it for you. Valthara called for Commander Vex and her other advisors. They argued for hours. Some said to refuse the challenge and accept the political consequences. Others said to go through with the surgery and take the risk. None of them could agree. Finally, Valthara sent them all away. She sat alone with Danny, watching him play with his flame painter. The boy created beautiful patterns in the air, lost in the joy of fire. He had come so far from the silent child sitting alone in the relief center. He was happy now. He had a home, friends, someone who loved him. Could she really send him back to that lonely existence just to avoid political trouble? Or should she risk his life to give him a real chance to stay? That night, Valthara made her decision. She called Jake and Dr. Helen to her quarters. "We do the surgery," she said. "Tomorrow. I will not lose him without fighting for him." Jake nodded. "I'll prep the workshop. We've set up a clean surgical area." "I will perform the procedure myself," Helen said. "I'm the best human surgeon on this ship." They told Danny what would happen. Katie was there too, holding his hand. They explained it in simple terms. Danny would go to sleep. The doctors would put something in his throat, and when he woke up, he would be able to breathe fire. Real fire, like the Empress. Danny looked scared, but he nodded. He trusted them. He touched his throat, then looked at Valthara with a question in his eyes. The Empress knelt down. "It will be all right, little one. You are braver than any warrior I have ever known, and whatever happens, you are my son. That will never change." The surgery took 6 hours. Valthara paced outside the workshop the entire time, unable to sit still. Commander Vex stayed with her, offering silent support despite his earlier objections. Jake sat on the floor, his head in his hands, praying to whatever gods humans believed in. Katie waited with her father, crying quietly. Finally, Dr. Helen emerged. She was covered in sweat and looked exhausted, but she was smiling. The surgery was successful. The device is in place and functioning correctly. Danny is sleeping now, but he should wake up in a few hours. We'll need to monitor him closely, but I believe he's going to be fine. Valthara felt her legs weaken with relief. The grand hall was more crowded than Valthara had ever seen it. Word of the challenge had spread across the Empire. Representatives from 24 species had arrived to witness the event. Some came to support the Empress. Others came hoping to see her fail. The hall buzzed with conversation and speculation. Ambassador Krauth sat in a prominent position, his blade-covered arms folded confidently. He had already declared victory to anyone who would listen. A human child breathing fire was impossible, and everyone knew it. The Empress would have to admit her mistake publicly. Danny woke up that morning nervous. The surgery site on his neck still hurt a little, though Dr. Helen had given him medicine to help. He had practiced with the device yesterday evening, learning how to trigger it with his breath. It worked, he could create fire. But doing it alone in a quiet room was very different from doing it in front of hundreds of powerful aliens. Valthara dressed in her full imperial armor, scales polished to a mirror shine, ceremonial blades at her sides. She looked every bit the warrior empress she was, but her hand shook slightly as she helped Danny put on a simple white tunic that humans wore for important ceremonies. "Are you ready?" she asked him gently. Danny looked up at her and nodded, though fear was clear in his eyes. He was just 3 years old. This was too much to ask of any child, but he would try because he did not want to leave. He did not want to go back to being alone. Jake and Katie arrived to escort them to the hall. Jake knelt down and looked Danny in the eyes. "Remember what we practiced. Deep breath in through your nose. Hold it for a count of 3. Then exhale hard through your mouth. The device will do the rest. You've done it 100 times. You can do it one more time." Katie hugged Danny tight. "You're the bravest person I know. You're going to be amazing." They walked through the corridors toward the grand hall. Every step felt too fast and too slow at the same time. Guards lined the path and crew members stopped to watch them pass. Word had spread about what was happening. The entire human district was hoping Danny would succeed. He represented all of them now. The massive doors to the grand hall opened. The crowd noise immediately dropped to silence. All eyes turned to watch the Dragon Empress enter with a small human child at her side. Valthara walked with her head high, showing no fear or doubt. Danny walked beside her, his small hand holding one of her clawed fingers. They reached the center of the hall. A ceremonial circle had been marked on the floor. the traditional place for fire trials. Valthara guided Danny into the circle. The boy looked so tiny standing there alone, surrounded by hundreds of massive aliens. Elder Thex, the oldest living Drakari, stepped forward to officiate. She was ancient, her scales faded to almost white, but her voice was still strong. We gathered to witness a fire trial. The child Danny, adopted son of Empress Valthara, will attempt to breathe his first flame. This is tradition. This is law. This is how we determine worth. Krauth stood up. Let the record show that I believe this trial to be a waste of time. The child is human. He cannot breathe fire. The Empress should admit her error now and save us all this spectacle. The challenge was issued. It will be answered, Elder Thex said firmly. Empress, do you wish to speak before the trial begins? Valthara looked down at Danny. The boy was trembling slightly. She wanted to grab him, take him away from here, protect him from all these staring eyes, but that would not help him. He needed to do this himself. I have watched this child for months, Valthara said, her voice carrying through the hall. He cannot speak. He was born without a voice. Many would call him broken, but I have seen him learn, adapt, and grow. I have seen him create art with fire that would shame many Drakari warriors. He may be human, but he has the spirit of a dragon. Today he will prove that. The hall remained silent. Valthara stepped back, leaving Danny alone in the circle. The boy looked around at all the faces watching him. So many aliens, so much power, so much judgment. His heart was beating so fast. His hands were shaking. Then he saw Jake and Katie in the crowd. Jake gave him a thumbs up. Katie blew him a kiss. In the front row, Dr. Helen stood with other humans from the district. They were all watching him with hope on their faces. Danny closed his eyes. He remembered what Jake taught him. Deep breath in through the nose. His small chest expanded. Hold for 3 counts. 1, 2, 3. Now exhale hard through the mouth. The device activated. The gases mixed. The spark ignited. Fire erupted from Danny's mouth. It was beautiful. The flame was pure blue, burning hotter than normal fire. It shot upward in a column 15 feet high. The light filled the hall, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Danny kept exhaling, keeping the flame steady and strong. The crowd gasped. Several officials stood up in shock. Even Elder Thex's eyes widened. The flame burned for 10 full seconds before Danny stopped to breathe in again. But he was not done. Jake had taught him more than just basic fire breathing. Danny breathed in again, and this time, when he exhaled, he moved his head in an arc, creating a sweeping wall of flame. Then another breath, another pattern. He created spirals, bursts, sustained streams. He changed the intensity by controlling his exhale force. The fire was not just functional. It was art. It was performance. It was a 3-year-old boy showing the entire empire that humans could master fire just as well as any Drakari, maybe better. When Danny finally stopped, breathing hard from the exertion, the hall was completely silent. No one knew what to say. They had expected failure. They had come to witness a human child's humiliation. Instead, they had witnessed something none of them had ever seen before. Krauth jumped to his feet. This is cheating. This is artificial. He has devices inside him. This is not true fire breathing. Elder Thex held up a clawed hand for silence. She walked slowly toward Danny, her ancient eyes studying him carefully. She gestured for him to open his mouth. Danny obeyed, tilting his head back. The elder peered inside, seeing the small device integrated into his throat. This is technology, Krauth shouted, not biology. It does not count. Elder Thex turned to face the assembly. Let me ask you all a question. How do Drakari breathe fire? We have organs in our throats that produce chemicals. These chemicals mix and combust when we exhale. These organs are biological tools built into our bodies by nature. Is this not so? Several Drakari nodded agreement. This human child has integrated a tool into his body that produces chemicals and creates combustion when he exhales. The method is technological instead of biological, but the principle is identical. He breathes in air. His body processes it through an internal system, and he exhales fire. This is fire breathing by any reasonable definition. But he is human, Krauth protested. He should not be able to. He is human, Elder Thex interrupted. And that makes this more impressive, not less. We Drakari are born with fire. It is given to us freely by nature. This child was not born with fire, so he and his people built it, created it, and integrated it into himself. They refused to accept the limitations of biology. They used intelligence and determination to achieve what nature denied them. The elder turned back to Danny. I have lived for 400 years. I have seen many young Drakari complete their first fire trial. Most of them create a simple flame and call it sufficient. You, small human, have created art with your fire. You have shown control and creativity that many adult Drakari lack. I formally recognize your flame as legitimate. The hall erupted in conversation. Some aliens cheered. Others argued. The human delegation was crying and hugging each other. Jake lifted Katie onto his shoulders so she could see better. She was screaming with joy. Krauth's face twisted with rage and humiliation. This is an outrage. The Vraxian Council will hear about this. The Vraxian Council may object all they wish, Valthara said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. But they will do so knowing that a 3-year-old human child showed more courage today than their ambassador ever has. The challenge has been answered. The trial is complete. My son stays with me. Danny stood in the center of the circle, still catching his breath. He had done it. He had breathed fire before the entire Imperial Court. He had proven himself worthy. Then something happened that no one expected. Danny opened his mouth. The device in his throat, designed primarily for fire breathing, also had another function. It could amplify vibrations from his damaged vocal cords. Jake had built it in as a backup feature, hoping it might someday give Danny a way to speak. The sound was rough, mechanically assisted, not quite natural. But it was unmistakably a word. One single word that Danny had been trying to say for months. Mother. The hall went silent. Danny had never spoken before. No one had ever heard his voice. And his first word, his very first word, was for the dragon Empress who had taken him in. Valthara felt something break inside her chest. All her centuries of control, all her training in showing no emotion, all her carefully maintained image of the cold warrior Empress, it all shattered in that moment. She dropped to her knees on the floor and reached out to Danny. The boy ran to her and she wrapped her massive arms around his tiny body. Tears fell from her golden eyes, hissing and turning to steam as they hit her hot scales. She held him close, this small human child who had become her son, and she did not care who saw her cry. My son, she whispered.